Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the 2020 GGANS Virtual Summer Tour. I'm glad we have found a way to get together in this challenging summer. Thank you to the Summer Tour Committee for adapting to the present realities and putting this program together. Thank you also to Perennia for providing this online platform today, and all of Francisco's work for putting this together and running the background IT work. The collaboration between GGANS and Perennia on getting info out to growers this year has been great. It's really shown in our best practices webinars, and I would encourage everyone to check them out. The last one was recorded and is on a Perennia Grape blog. If you're not getting the Grape blog, just go to the Perennia site and sign up. It's got lots of info and links. A big thank you to all of our presenters today as well. Kevin Kerr from Brock University, Becca Griffin from Mercator and Gasborough Vineyards, as well as being the committee chairperson for the summer tour. Mike Mainguy from Luckett, and Jean-Guy and Stephan from D'Entremont's Vineyards. During the presentations today, if you have a question, please use the Q&A tab and type it in, and we will try to get to as many as we can. I know we would rather be in someone's vineyard today for this, but at least we can see some views and listen to some interesting speakers from the comfort of our homes. Last but not least, thank you to all of our sponsors who have joined us for our first virtual summer tour. Throughout the program today, you will see that we have a host of local and interprovincial sponsors that show how supportive and close-knit our industry is. I think it shows how we've grown the wine grape industry here in Nova Scotia, and that we can attract sponsors from all over. Some of the sponsors have made educational videos, while others will introduce us to new products. Some are familiar names and some are new, and a big thank you to all of them. Please support them as you can and give them a thank you when doing business with them. The products and services they supply are very important to all of us, and their support helps keep GGANS running and your membership fees low. And with that, we can get the tour started with a clip from a platinum sponsor, Upper Canada Growers. They are a new sponsor, and their work with the Canadian Grape Certification Network should be commended. Their commitment to providing certified clean vines is good news for all of us. Thank you.
Material acquisition. All grapevine plant material produced by Upper Canada Growers is derived from first-generation virus-tested stock. This originates from the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. 5 to 10 scions and 2 rootstocks will be sent to the GRIP lab at the University of Guelph. This lab will develop a protocol for growing, multiplying, and rooting these samples in media under controlled conditions. Once optimized protocols are developed, the plant material will be sent to the Covey lab at Brock University. This lab will check again for the presence of viruses. Once the plant material is confirmed virus-free, it can then be shipped to Hopetown Plant Labs. Lab process. After arriving at Hopetown Plant Labs, the virus-free material will be stored in an isolated, climate and light-controlled room. Every effort will be made to maintain a sterile lab environment and protect the plant material from infection. Tools will be sterilized throughout the day. Employees will continually sterilize their laminar flow benches with ethanol and wear personal protective equipment. This will ensure that the plant material does not become infected while it is being multiplied. Monitoring and recording. We will regularly monitor our plant material for visual signs of viruses and other diseases. If needed, we will conduct tests for the presence of viruses. Records will be kept of these inspections, as well as other details that will enable us to keep track of our stock and ensure that we meet production timelines. This technical and scientific process will allow us to be the first company to produce certified virus-free grapevines in Canada.
thanks again to all of our sponsors. Now I'd ask Becca to introduce Kevin Kerr, please.
Thanks, Steve. Good afternoon, everyone. Today feels like a rare day because it feels like there's a bit of rain in the air, which would be very nice for, I think, a lot of us. I think we're all needing that right now, so we'll keep our fingers crossed. But for now, I have the pleasure of introducing Dr. Kevin Kerr. Kevin was one of my professors at Brock University, and we've kept in touch since, thankfully. So I'll just give you a bit of background on Kevin right now. Kevin's academic background is in horticulture, environmental biology, and extension education. He spent 18 years working in the Ontario government as IPM specialist and grape specialist, and the last 25 years as a consultant, researcher, and educator at Brock University. Along with teaching at Brock, he has conducted presentations and courses across North America, in Australia, and New Zealand. For the last 10 years, he has consulted in China, developing new vineyards and wineries, and he will touch on that at the end of today's tour, virtual tour. His research has included vine hardiness, plant nutrition, vine grow tubes, wind machines, tile drainage, and plant protection strategies, among other things. As a personal note, Kevin guided our company through the difficult period after the freeze in spring of 2018. And from the results of the vineyards this year, it's really worked. There will be time for questions after Kevin's presentation, so keep that in mind. For now, take it away, Kevin.
Thanks, Becca. Now the fun comes in getting my presentation to come up. All right. Not that one. All right. This one. Slideshow, play from start. I hope everyone can see this and can hear me. And if you can't, well, I may look like a mime kind of going crazy. This is my first attempt at the Zoom approach. What I was asked to talk about a little bit was pesticide choices and dealing with some of the registration changes that are coming up.
Excuse me.
Yes?
We cannot see your presentation, your screen.
Oh, let's go to, come on, here we are. Start video. Okay, there's the camera. Let's try this again. Share screen. Ah, there we go.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. As was mentioned before, there are some pesticide registration changes coming, and Becca asked me to talk about it, and this is what I will do for the next few minutes. Just to put it in perspective, all pesticide products are reevaluated in Canada on a 15-year cycle. So the point of that being that there would not be any one material registered, let's say in 1970, and still let go based on old data. So every 15 years, products undergo reviews. And what they do is look at the most recent scientific information. Registrants provide information along with their federal counterparts and any information in scientific literature. The components of the review and reevaluations include if there's been any changes with environmental impact. They also now take into account worker exposure as well as dietary exposure. In other words, oral intake. Probably of biggest note coming along in the foreseeable future, the product Rovril or Iprodione, which is used for botrytis control. Last farm use is June 21st next year. Furbam, December 14th, which has primarily been used for black rot. Quintec, which was a powdery mildew material, on June 20th. And probably the greatest one for most people are Polyram, or an EBDC material, which has been the backbone of downy mildew and black rot control. Its last farm use is June 21st next year. There have been some changes to other products as well. Super Captan or Maestro WDG will be available, but it's now converting into what they call a wettable soluble powder formulation. Instead of a rate of 1.2 kilos or 2 kilos per hectare, it still stays at 2. We had an unlimited number of applications. Next year, it will be a maximum of 3 applications per season. And the change of probably the greatest importance for most grape growers, instead of having a 72-hour re-entry interval, they're now going to 55 days for hand harvest training and leaf pulling. Now, I want to put that in perspective. That's if you go in unprotected. If you were to wear protective gear to go in, then you could re-enter the vineyard prior to the 55 days. But what they're saying is if you aren't wearing protective equipment, it's 55 days to go back in. The products that have last farm use on December 21st are Dithane, Manzate, Pencozeb, Gavel, and Ridamil Gold MZ. The Ridamil Gold is because of the Manzate component. The Pencozeb Gavel is because of Pencozeb or Manzate in it, and Dithane on its own. The Grape Growers of Ontario and the Ontario Fruit and Vegetable Growers Association are still working with task forces to try and get Mancozeb to get the PMRA, or Pest Management Regulatory Agency, to review it further and try and extend this interval. But as it stands right now, they're proposing the last farm use would be December 2021. Much of what I will mention to you comes from the OMAFRA publication. This publication is available online. I know it will be emailed out, this link, to all the grape growers of Nova Scotia. And on this, it has publication 360C, which is the crop protection section for grapes for this year and next. Each year it's updated. There'll be some minor modifications made over the winter, so be sure to check back every time. Generally by January, they have all changes for the future year put into place. But anything that happens in the calendar year doesn't quite show up until the following year in the publication itself. So FolPan, what have we got? The PMRA decision for January 22. They're changing from wettable dry granule to all wettable soluble powders, a maximum of 1.25 kilograms per hectare and a maximum of 6 applications. The bigger change was a 3-day re-entry interval for hand activities such as harvest, training, or leaf pulling, and 1-day re-entry interval for machine harvesting. The other products that have been expanded and some things and new ones that have come on, Savia is a product that's been around for a few years. It's considered a group 3 for powdery mildew. Miravis Prime belongs to group 7 plus 12 for botrytis and powdery mildew. Serafel belongs to group 44, botrytis and powdery mildew, and Stargus is a suppressant. Lifeguard, they were hoping to get through in July this year. That hasn't happened yet. It's a plant activator for powdery and downy mildew. Malathion has been added, has had spotted wing Drosophila added to it. Suffix Oil X has been added for mites, and Viego is a new product that has been added for grape berry moth. Normally, in the programs that most people have been following, they've been looking at a Mancozeb or a Metaram, which is Polyram, along with a sulfur product in terms of their first few sprays. They've alternated with putting in Captan as well. The dilemma is that if you notice, we've relied very heavily on Metaram or Mancozeb or Captan to get us through till bloom period. This has been the traditional program that most people have followed for the last number of years. The changes that are coming, again, the Captan Maestro is being changed to the 55-day re-entry interval, which changes things dramatically, and the loss of the Mancozeb and Metaram materials. So as a result, we've had to rethink of really what's out there. And what we need to think about and remind ourselves, we still have products available. FolPan is very similar to Captan Maestro. Its efficacy in terms of Phomopsis and downy mildew, and it's highly recommended on hybrids as well as those that are Phomopsis prone. Copper products such as Copper 53, Copper Oxychloride, Copper Sprays, Cueva, and Coside, they're considered moderately effective against downy mildew. In other words, they're best as a preventative material rather than looking at it as a curative product. And they only have marginal suppression against Phomopsis and black rot. If you've had issues with these in the past, these are things that we have to consider. The other materials that are very good for downy mildew are considered the systemic group of fungicides giving pre-infection as well as post-infection activity. These are Fostrol, Rampart, and Aliette. They belong to group 33. Their forward protection is somewhat restricted if there's very much a burst of active growth. So in those situations, you often have to look at sprays no more than 5 to 7 days apart. But they're not really very efficient or have any efficacy against Phomopsis or black rot. Oil products, which have been advocated by some, pure spray green oil, are much better against powdery mildew. There's some suppression of downy mildew, but I would not consider them control. As well, oil products should not be considered effective for Phomopsis, and really I wouldn't consider them effective for downy mildew if there's problems. You cannot also, if you've used Captan, Maestro, or Full Pan or sulfur, you cannot use these oil products within 14 days before or after. So if you use an oil product, you would not be allowed to use Full Pan within 14 days or sulfur. Similarly, if you had used Full Pan or sulfur or Maestro, then you were 14 days until you could possibly use oil. So you need to watch these things, especially when using copper products post-bloom. We do have some materials for Phomopsis and downy mildew. Nova, Savia, Fullback, and Metal are still registered for that. They're primarily used against powdery mildew, but they do have black rot activity. And we expect that black rot could potentially become an issue in the future on susceptible cultivars with the loss of Metaram and Mancozeb. What you want to watch with these products, it's a 12-hour reentry for general reentry, 7 days for Nova and Fullback, and 15 days for Metal for hand labor, and 12 hours for anything for Savia. So again, they're trying to use common sense. The products need to be on, they need to be dry and in place, and then you have to look at your reentry periods and the practices you want to follow. So the growth stage, so in looking at really what we've been talking to a number of people about is looking at what they're going to try and do in the future. And what they're looking at is going to Full Pan plus sulfur as their early sprays, possibly including a copper product. When we get to the inflorescence fully developed, that's where Fostrol has been looked at if downy mildew has been an issue in the past, because it does have systemic activity, pre-infection and post-infection. If black rot is a concern, then you'd look at a group 3 product, and that's again coming back to your Metal or Nova, those particular ones. Once you get past or get finally into bloom, then you should be looking at the locally systemic materials. They'll give you the best bang for your buck, and they won't wash off. Between immediate pre-bloom through early veraison, it's been traditionally, we rely on these locally systemic materials, but when you do them, make sure that you rotate them. And the key there is that's why I've introduced and explained to you a little bit about the numbers on the products. Basically, when you select a product, don't follow it with another product with the same group number. Pretty simple, but sometimes it can get a little complicated. And where it can happen is their powdery mildew is basically the same. The only loss was Quintac. So an example of this is looking at downy mildew. What you've got are product such as Torrent, which is a group 21 all by itself. Pristine is a blend of 2 materials, which is group 7 plus 11. Fostrol and Rampart, Confine, and Alietta are group 33, and Revis and Forum are group 40. Zampro is a 40 plus 45 and has a 12-day reentry. What you want to do is take into account that you have 3 main groups. Group 21 and 40 give excellent forward protection and have some back protection. Group 33 have their greatest activity as their post-infection or anti-sporulation to prevent things from getting out of hand. So in other words, no more than 2 applications from any group for a single season. In the immediate post-bloom, we would probably look at starting with something like Torrent. Then you could move to a Revis, Forum, or Zampro, and then you could come back again later on. In mid-season alternatives, we lose our EBDC group, which is Dithane, Manzate, Polyram, Maestro, and Supra. We have to look at copper materials possibly, as well as Sovereign is another material that's out there, and Timorex. Organic growers, though, however, are limited to copper products during the downy mildew season. There are new biological products that are being looked at. They're in the trialing phase with some potential for downy mildew, which would be good news for organic growers. Conventional growers concerned with late season downy mildew should rely primarily on Pristine or Full Pan as their products of choice. For botrytis or bunch rot, beyond the loss of Ravel is June 2021. As well, they're looking at a maximum of 1 application of Elevate and increased reentry interval from 1 day to 5 days. And they want 12-hour reentry. Elevate had a very short window and was used previously in other years, very close to harvest. Now we're having to think about this at least a minimum of 5 days prior to harvest. Critical timings, the immediate post-bloom, at the berry touch or pre-cluster closure to get some residual material in, veraison as they've started to color up, and again during the ripening phase. Combination products can be advantageous when powdery mildew is a concern. So this is when we're starting to look at materials such as Pristine or Luna Tranquility. Save botrytis products with a single mode of action or that are specific to botrytis for later on in the use, and that's where you're going to come into your Elevate. So an example there is Kenja is a single group, group 7. Scala is a group 9. But when you look at the blending materials such as Luna Tranquility, Switch, Inspire, Miravis, and Pristine, if you notice, we've got numbers bouncing back and forth. So Luna Tranquility and Pristine could not be one following the other because they both have a group 7. You couldn't use Pristine, or you could not use Inspire Super after Switch because it's both containing group 9. Miravis Prime has a 7 plus 12. So again, you can't use it looking at Luna Tranquility, and you wouldn't want to use Kenja. So it may sound complicated. The key is make sure when you choose products that you move to another group where you only have, you have a totally different number from the prior application. Combination such for powdery mildew are Luna Tranquility, Inspire Super, and Miravis Prime. But again, watch the group 9s, Scala, Luna Tranquility, and Miravis Inspire Super. Plan ahead and don't get stuck with your rotations, especially if you use something for powdery mildew in the prior spray. The proposed one is looking immediate post-bloom at Luna Tranquility or Inspire Super. Then your next choice, if you used Inspire Super, you might look at Miravis Prime, because now you're totally rotating out. At Veraison, Scala is being used at this time because it can have some impact on discoloration for red wines, so we don't want it used later than that point in terms of Veraison. And finally, for ripening, you've basically got Elevate or Switch would have using a 7-day window for harvest. So with that, that's been a fairly quick move of what the changes are coming. It's important that everybody understand that this is what's going on. And if there's any questions at this point, I'm sure Becca's got some in hand, and we can go from there.
Okay, folks, if you've got any questions, please enter them in the Q&A box. Thanks, Kevin. It'll make it more challenging in terms of Downey, but I guess they have to keep us on our toes.
Yeah, it's something, but there are new products coming.
I've been using Seraphyll quite a bit, and I think I'm quite pleased with the results so far.
Are there people out there that have been using other strategies to deal with downy mildew? They may be a bit overwhelmed.
Well, luckily this is being recorded, so we can return to it if we have other questions. Okay. Well, I guess if you have, Kevin will be here for the entire tour. So if you have questions or as you think about it, at the end of the tour, Kevin will be back with another presentation. So I guess we could take it then.
Excellent.
Thanks again, Kevin.
Thanks, Becca. That's great. That's really interesting, Kevin. There's a lot of good information there for sure for us all to absorb. Like you say, it's a lot to hit us with, but yeah, we'll the presentations are going to be shared, and the whole thing session today is being recorded. So a lot of good information to look back on for sure. And I think our strategy here, we're a blended approach, the same as a lot of people, not purely organic, but a lot of copper products and a lot of the bios for sure. But yeah, we're going to have to really keep on our toes going forward. At this time, I think we're going to have another look through our sponsors, and then we'll get on to the rest of our program.
Excuse me, Becca, we just received a couple of questions now, so I don't know if you can see it.
I can see that.
Okay.
Okay, Kevin, you're back. Okay, so I have a question about tank mix compatibility for Downey and I don't know how to pronounce it, Odium?
Yeah.
Lime sulfur dormant spray access in Nova Scotia, copper reactivity.
Shouldn't be an issue. Generally, lime sulfurs are used substantially earlier than you'd probably be using the copper materials, but there shouldn't be. The lime sulfur generally it's a fairly neutral material. There's no pH. Some people may be concerned. They think that sulfur will react with things, but it really shouldn't be a big issue.
I know that in California, when I was out there a few years ago, they had been using lime sulfur as a dormant spray quite a bit, and most of them have stopped completely now, and I think they're just going dormant oil. That's just
the lime sulfur, the dilemma out of it was the volume of material that had to be applied was so high, you literally had to whitewash, you had to paint the trunk area. And you were doing it prior to, and in most cases, most people didn't have their sprayers up and running at that time. Bud break was usually ahead of them, and they couldn't get it on. So that was one of the reasons they pulled away from it, and that was probably the biggest.
Okay, I have another question. Is Lifeguard plant activator organic, and is it available? Okay.
It's not available as yet, is my understanding. They're still going through the hoops. And I believe it is supposed to have organic certification, but until it fully comes through, we won't know, because it'll still have to get an OMRI designation.
Anyone else? Okay, I think maybe we'll go back to we'll continue on.
Great.
Becca, we have received 2 more questions.
Okay, I think my internet is a bit sketchy, even though I'm hardwired in. Questions. Products to induce lignification fruit maturity.
Always a great question of trying to escalate.
I'm interested in that too.
Phase. We've done some work in terms of lignification, in terms of overall plant maturity. We did some testing with the copper products very late season, often used in Ontario post-harvest to try and accelerate maturity of the vines. On some vines it works, and some vines it doesn't. We found out the bigger issue with it was that it seemed to have more of a sterilizing effect on the surface. We were actually killing some of the saprophytic bacteria that going into the winter, which helped the maturity of the vine and going along. In terms of enhancing fruit maturity, that's sunlight-based and plant-based, but there's no real products that we can spray on and say, okay, we want the plant to mature more quickly than normal.
And how about arresting the apical growth?
There really is not much there. It's a trigger, it's a function of the nutrient status within the plant, and often what happens is there's a late flush of nitrogen that can result in late growth. It's a photoperiod trigger. The plant needs to shut down when the day length gets shorter. The dilemma that we have here, as well as in Nova Scotia, is that it seems to get short very fast. Like, there's not a big window of it, and that's only at that point does the plant itself shut down. Your day length stays long well into the summer, and then suddenly come September, everything starts shortening very quickly. So there isn't much that you can do to stop terminal growth other than looking at a really balanced nutrient program.
Okay, we have another question. Any opinion on the use of copper 53 for downy? The label says it should not be used on French hybrids or vinifera.
Yes, and part of it's because of the formulation of it. That's why you want to look at some of the other copper products. Copper can come as copper oxychloride, can come as copper hydroxide, can come as a number of different things. And the key is looking at to make sure that what you've got is a reasonable copper. Always check the labels. The companies, I'll be honest, they haven't done a lot of work on specific cultivars in the last 10 to 15 years. So some of the newer ones like Frontenac, Marquette, Frontenac Gris, those ones, there's very little information relative to phytosensitivity on them because they weren't around when the product was registered.
Okay, thank you. Oh, we have another one. What hybrids are tested true for sulfur sensitivity? External to the notice Foch.
Yeah, well, yeah, see some of them, if you go, again, going through publication 360, they have the varietal list in it. And if you go through it, it actually talks about sensitivities. There are pages in there. And I recommend people go to those because it will list which are sensitive for copper, which are sensitive for sulfur, which are sensitive for some of the other products. To try and rattle them off and have everybody remember it, it can be a bit of a challenge. But that link that I posted, I suggest people go to it and then go into it and look at the activity on the pest, but also look at the page with the cultivars and the sensitivity list.
Thanks, Kevin. I know that I don't use it on my French hybrids, but I do tend to use it a bit on the Marquette until late season, if needed.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, no questions for now. So let's keep on trucking.
Okay, thanks again. Great presentation, a lot of good information. Good questions too. So when the Summer Tour Committee realized that we couldn't have our traditional summer get-together, they saw this as an opportunity to visit a vineyard we normally wouldn't get to travel to. This takes us all the way down to Carleton, just outside of Yarmouth. I'd like to thank Jean-Guy and Marlene d'Entremont for allowing us to include their vineyard in today's tour. I met Jean-Guy a few years ago and quickly learned he is a man with a passion for life and for business. To take on this vineyard project after a career in the fisheries earns my respect. You will see from the following video, he and his team take great pride and care in their work. Thank you, Jean-Guy and Marlene.
Hello grape growers and welcome to d'Entremont Vineyards, or Les Vignobles d'Entremont. My name is Jean-Guy d'Entremont and I'm here with my wife Marlene. We're both Acadians. Welcome to Carleton, southwest tip of Nova Scotia. We are about 20 minutes from the ocean. We're located on the glacial drumlin and about 20 minutes drive from Yarmouth. We'll talk briefly on the history of the vineyards, and then later Stephen and Rita Dolder, our vineyard managers, will speak to the specifics. In 2011, Marlene and I, on our 30th wedding anniversary, decided to go to Italy and spend 30 days, one day for each year we're married. And we came back extremely impressed with the vineyards. So one day I found out that the Nova Scotia government had conducted a climate data study, and it proved that the climate here in southwest Nova is conducive to growing grapes. So we decided to buy some property. We hired Perennia. They conducted a site assessment, and we hired a consultant, and we planted our first 4,000 grapes, of which they're right here behind us, the Chardonnay. So we expanded and we decided to buy 3 more properties. and 2 of those are now planted. So with that, I think I'm going to leave. Last year we hired Stephen and Rita Dolder, and they are our vineyard managers, and they will speak more to the vineyard itself. Thank you.
Hello, Grape Growers. I'm Stephen.
And I'm Rita.
We are the vineyard managers here at Dondermo Vineyard. The next few minutes, I want to give you some information about facts here, about the climate here in our area, how we grow here, and about our employees. So let's start with a few facts. Right now we have 16 acres planted here in the Carlton field and in the Forest Glen field. We have 45% vinifera. That's Chardonnay, 3 different clones on 2 different rootstocks. That's the 3309 and the 10114. We have 45% Luckett on own root, and we have 10% Seyval and Geisenheim on own root. When we look over the fence, that's another 8 acres that we have on 2 different fields that we just trained this year actually. And that's going to be planted somewhere down the road. We are thinking about maybe different red varieties and probably a couple more white varieties with a little bit of a different flavor than what we have right now. A few words about the climate here in the Carlton Forest Glen area. Yes, many of you think you cannot grow grapes here in Yarmouth. That is actually right. Yarmouth alone has about 700 growing degree days, but you go 15-20 minutes inland and you have 1,000 growing degree days. So we are always about 5 to 8 degrees warmer than Yarmouth during the summer. We are a little bit warmer in winter here than the valley, but on the other hand we are a little bit cooler, a couple of degrees in summertime, or what you can see right now, we have a little bit more fog than the valley. We do have 2 different types of soil here that I want to talk just for a second during the time we walk through the Luckett. We do have a Yarmouth soil here with a sandy loam about 15 to 18 inches deep, and in other fields we do have the Halifax soil. Both soils are very rocky, what I want to mention later on a little bit more. Rain has been a little bit of a challenge lately. I never thought that we have 3 droughts within 6 years. So for example, this year in June we had only 19 millimeters of rain. In July we are still down 50% of the rain. We do grow all our Chardonnays and Vinifera's at a 3-foot distance and 8-foot rows. 30% of our Vinifera's actually are grown with a double trunk, like the way we are in that block right now. And 70%, those are more the newer Vinifera's, they are grown with a single trunk. What we have done here lately, that's the leaving with the machine, and then we go through by hand, help a little bit more with the leaving, and do cluster thinning. And then the plants are actually ready to ripen. All our hybrids are planted in a 4-foot distance, still in the 8-foot rows. That's for example the Luckett block where we are right now. Those plants are in the 3rd year. They're doing not too bad, and we leave about 30% on there for the 1st year of cropping. I mentioned earlier the rocks. Yes, we do have a big challenge here with rocks. We have plenty and plenty of those all over the vineyard. They are tough on the machine, they are tough on our bodies, but we all know grapes love rocks. We are growing here conventionally, and I want help to manage the whole thing. For example, we use numbers all over the vineyard. Every color has belongs to a different variety. When we turn around a little bit, you see our French drain. That is something we build at a few places to the vineyard when we have little hills. Water is running down after a heavy rain. We can catch it here. It doesn't go into our next block. We just haul the water out of the vineyard. When we look back into our Chardonnay block, that's the one area where we just de-leaved with the machine. So we do use machines for de-leaving. We use machines for hatching. We use machines actually for weeding. And we use even a pre-pruner later on in winter time then. When we turn a little bit more to the left, we see something else that we started this year, roses. It's not only for beautification of the vineyard, we use it as a little tool actually for early detection of both types of mildew. Row 15 blue, we use blue for all our Seyvals. Those plants are in the third year. We decided actually not to crop it this year. The plants were a little bit too weak. They didn't have enough reserve from last year. So we cut all the fruit away, let them grow an extra year and start cropping next year. Here we're standing in front of our nursery. We always have a few leftover plants that we put in here, plant them very close together so they don't grow too much. And if a one for any reason wouldn't survive the first winter, we can actually replant them with those plants here. We keep daily track of the temperature, sunshine and rain. And we keep even track for all our stages, from bud break to first flower to caps off to berry touch to horizon. And I would recommend everybody to keep track of temperature, rain and all the different stages of the grape growing, so you can actually compare next year, are we behind, are we ahead, for example. We use side bird netting to protect against the birds here. That's the way actually we store our netting. That's all the netting for our Chardonnay that's attached lengthwise on the tractor. So we literally just have to drive on top of every row, and hydraulic just rolls it in. Very quick and efficient, and at the end we just throw a blanket over the top and it's ready for another winter. That's our hatcher here. We use a hatcher that does both sides and the top at the same time. We really love it. It goes quick and very efficient. One thing I want to mention here, what we had to do, we had to build at least an 8-foot fence around every block, around every property. We are in an area where we have a very high deer population, and the only way to protect our vineyard against the deer is just to fence them out. We really like the good communication we have here in Nova Scotia with other grape growers. I would like to mention here definitely Luckett, like Marcel or Mike, Steve Ells, for example, Patrick Cantiani, and definitely Francisco. We have 2 more full-time employees during the season here. That's Evelyn here and Chris. He is busy in the vineyard right now. Some of us are going back to school. Some of us are taking some time off, or what we have started last winter, we built our own trellis system for the 7-acre expansion that we did last year. With all the rocks that I mentioned a couple of times, you can imagine it wasn't easy, it was hard on us, but the job got done.
Hello, grape growers. Well, as you see, this is vineyard work is a lot of teamwork, and but it's very satisfying in the end, even if it's hard work. So you have a nice day, and I hope you enjoyed D'Entremont Vineyard visit.
Now we're going to get to enjoy a little bit of drone work that Francisco and Frenia did while they were visiting D'Entremont Vineyards. Should be quite enjoyable to see that vineyard from the air.
What we can see here, that's the drone just past the Chardonnay block in Carleton. In the back is the field that we drained this year for future expansions. So Chardonnay, all those rows are north-south. So north is on the back, south is at the front. Then at the bottom we see Luckett, and on the left we see 2 blocks. Those are the Seyval blocks. And on the left-hand side, what you can see now, that's our security system for the whole vineyard. It's a cemetery. And at the bottom, we should see now actually Highway 340. That is just a couple of 100 feet away from downtown of Carleton. So whenever you drive on the 340, just before you come to the Carleton store, you see actually our vineyard. So again, the Chardonnay field, that's the 2nd year. We're gonna crop those ones, so that's the 4th year in the ground. We're still not gonna have 100% crop on there. I wanna be a little bit careful. And the Luckett, that's in the back now, that's the 1st year that we're gonna crop it just slightly a little bit. Then on the left, we see one of the two lakes that we have in Carleton. We have on both sides actually a lake. That is something typical for our area here. We have hundreds and hundreds of lakes with cottages, and it's a great help actually even for temperature control. Or temperature control, it's a moderate climate then thanks to the lakes, I have to say.
Stephen, do you use the cultivators or do you use herbicides for controlling the weeds under your vines?
We do a combination. When the pressure is really high, we use actually herbicide underneath the rows. But on the other hand, when the plant is at least 2 years old, we start using actually the radial arm. That's again just a look. You go ahead.
Sorry, I was just wondering if you're starting to see any veraison in your Luckett yet this year.
No, I do not see much of veraison right now in Luckett. They had a little bit, a couple of tough years, and we really had some challenges with the rain down here. So I think that just slowed them down a little bit more. So for example, the grapes from the Chardonnay, they're more on the hill. They got probably a bit more water. They look, in my point, actually better than the Luckett right now. That is our second field that is in Forest Glen. That's just about 5 miles away. Again, rows north to the south. We have about just over 7 acres in the back that we planted last year. In the front or at the bottom, those are the 2.5 acres that we planted this year. So we have mostly in the back are Chardonnay and Luckett again, about 50% each, or roughly 5,000 plants each. And in the front, we added on this year 4,000 plants, Luckett, Geisenheim, and Chardonnay, all planted by hand. The field actually that is at the bottom of your screen right now, that's an additional close to 2 acres what we drained this year as well. Again, that is just for future, probably in a couple of years that we add on there a few more. We have a little bit of a slope, about 3% going from west to east, and a little bit of a slope going from north to south. So that's how we can actually, what we see right now from north to the south end. That field in Forest Glen, that's even worse for rocks. Here, literally, we hauled hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of loads of rocks out of the field. And even right now, when we hill or dehill our Chardonnay, you find tons and tons of rocks. And it's going to be another couple of years at least where we have to clean up all those rocks, and then probably it start getting better. At the top of the screen, we see 2 of the lakes. We have one more lake on the right-hand side. So we are surrounded again by 3 lakes that are very close to the property. Interesting thing, over the last 2 years, we have noticed here that we have even a little bit of warmer climate here. For example, we had about the first frost 3 weeks later last year than in Carleton, and even, for example, this morning, the temperature was 2 degrees warmer than in Carleton. So we're really hoping actually for our vinifera here that we have on top of the hill, that it's going to help us a little bit to not to fight the first frost as early as last year, for example. That's the field where we put our trellis system in ourselves. Has been a big challenge, but when we look back now, we're kind of proud to say we did it ourselves. And as soon as we are done with the harvest this year, that's what we're going to do on those 2.5 acres that we planted this year. We're going to put our line and end post in ourselves.
I see we have one question and a comment, Stephen. Let me just bring it up here. So we have a question about are frost fans viable for in Nova Scotia for the winter, and I can answer that a little bit. That there are a few frost fans around, and I don't have a definitive answer if they're working perfectly through the winter for cold events or not. Usually we don't have events cold enough to worry about that. And then the other comment is from that he's curious about the comments from the drought. And he comes from the Okanagan, where he's used to very dry conditions. I think probably this too, and you can comment on this, Stephen, but usually it's the young vines that we worry about. Once vines are established into that 5 to 10 year range, we have lots of water here, even in a dry year like this. But I think usually the vines under 5 years old in a year like this, where it's quite dry, we might find some concerns in a lighter, not as deep soil.
I definitely have seen actually more, I wouldn't call it damage, but a slowdown in the Luckett. They are just, in the third year, and in the Seyval, in the Chardonnay, they are a year older. We saw way less of a problem. And the fruit there and the plant actually really, they grew very beautiful. And the Luckett, for a long time in June, when we had hardly any rain at all, they were kind of on a standstill. And as soon as we got that rain there, end of June, they literally exploded.
Okay, any other questions from anyone? The vineyard looks great. I really admire your approach, taking it cautious with those young vines. I think getting them established and off to a good, healthy start is really important, and I think you'll pay that in the long term for sure. The vineyard looks great. I'd really like to get down and see it sometime.
Please do that.
I owe you a steak dinner anyway, Steve. Come down anytime. You're always welcome.
I will hold that to you. I will hold that to you. We have another one here. Noted that you are using grow tubes, and when do you remove them?
That really depends a little bit on how much they grow. For example, this year we were able to start planting more early because we did it by hand and not with the machine. So we actually removed the grow tubes right now. All the plants are, let's say, a few inches to a foot above the grow tube. So we removed the grow tube. So they still have, a little bit of a chance actually to enjoy the sun up there and get adjusted to the climate. In the past years, actually, or last year, for example, where they did not grow that quick, we left them on till first week of September.
My good friend Harold would like to know what your soil pH is down there.
Right now, it's roughly 6.6.
Do you have to do a lot of adjusting? What's your natural pH? Do you regularly every year with lime, or just off and on?
Yeah, for example, before we started, the soil test showed anywhere between 5.4 and 5.8. So yes, lime is needed here, yeah.
Yeah, small amounts every other year or so, probably.
We started this year with a new fertilizer program. Yes, that means whatever the soil has showed us, we're going to add on every year a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I don't see any more questions yet, but there might be some pop up here. Just give it another minute or two. But I think the effects of those lakes, I mean, surrounded by lakes, it's got to be great for moderating and getting rid of those frosts and staving the frost off.
It helps in the fall for sure.
So I've got one more question here that I'll give you the option of answering or not. You can just smile and wave to this one if you want. But are any plans for a winery?
I'll let Jean-Guy answer that.
Yeah, actually, I think it's the natural progression. Likely down the road, there will be a winery. I'm not promising when, but it looks promising.
And just so you know, Jean-Guy, that question wasn't directly from me. That came in on the Q&A tab. So it wasn't me throwing you under the bus on that one.
That's okay. But we still will provide Lucketts with all these grapes. We promised them for quite a few years to go here.
Yeah, great. Okay, thank you very much. So we're going to move on now and have another little look at our sponsors, and then we'll move on to our next item on the program. Thank you very much for joining us. And next up, we have a familiar face take us on a bit of a tour of Luckett's Winery and give us an update on what's happening there. Mike Mainguy is the winemaker at Luckett's and a well-known personality within our wine grape industry. I'm sure almost all of us have had a glass or two of his product. We will also get to do a guided tasting on this portion, so I hope everyone has their bottles ready. I picked mine up from the winery on Wednesday. Thanks very much for Mike. Thanks, Mike, for putting this together.
Hi, good afternoon, grape growers. Welcome to the virtual tour. Kind of a little strange this year, but hey, the technology is here. Why don't we try to use it, right? So I'm Mike Mainguy, executive winemaker at Luckett Vineyards, for those of you who don't know me. Well, what a difference a year makes, eh, guys? It's been crazy. Been a lot going on, obviously. You know, certainly COVID has changed our world, everyone's world, and now it's been sort of an adapting period and figuring out what the new situation's going to be. But as all of you know, as grape growers, life goes on and the grapes keep growing, and what a difference that year is compared to the last few years. So I hope everyone's in pretty good spirits these days. It's been a pretty good year. I mean, it's not without its problems and a lot of humidity issues, but man, the heat came back this year, that's for sure. And yeah, it's nice to see some fruit on the vines after what was a really hard couple of years. So welcome to the tour. I'm going to give you just kind of a little bit of a rundown, and we're going to do a little bit of a try with a virtual tasting. So I've picked a couple wines to try for you, and a nice little range of some things that are happening right now here at Luckett Vineyards, and you know, a nice link to the work that you as fine grape growers do for us and for our entire industry here in the province. So I'll do a little bit of an introduction on a few of the wines and a little bit of a background, and then I'm going to have Ray Tilley, who is our retail manager here. She runs the shop at Luckett Vineyards, and she's also a recent graduate of the NSCC, the winery program there. So nice little tie to our local industry as well, and nice to see some really good people coming out of that program, and it's developing and coming along really nicely. So I'm going to bore you with a few little details about some of the wines and some of the things, the ways that we make them, and your product and how it contributes. And then I'm going to have Ray do the actual little tasting part, because let's face it, nobody wants to hear me talk that long, and you know, there's a reason they keep me out of the tasting bar. You know, maybe I'm yeah, it's not always my strong suit. You should also know as well that all of these wines are available at the NSLC, so if you do want to try them afterwards, if you can't make it to our lovely vineyards, which is open under restrictions, the same ones that you're all fully aware of, but yeah, you can try these wines out if you haven't already. So okay, so the first wine that I decided to talk about today is our Triumph d'Alsace is the grape. Not a lot of people grow it in the province. There's a few growers, but we have a significant amount of it planted. And for us, since the beginning of the winery, it's been kind of a steady little workhorse in the single varietal category, and it's really the only single varietal red that I've made in a few years. Triumph took a real hit. Triumph d'Alsace took a real hit in the frost of 2018. We basically, after the frost, we cut it back 100%. Anything that was, there wasn't there, and we decided to just completely, sort of to take it off. So we had no fruit that year. But what happened in 2019 was that the fruit actually came back, and it was one of our best performers. As far as red grapes go, it really, sprung back nicely, where some of the other grapes that we had pushed the fruit, even minimal fruit in 2018, did not fare well in the tough 2019 season. So the Triumph fared remarkably well. I like to make it in kind of a lighter, fruitier style. It's more of a fruit-forward wine. It's got a lot of good berry characteristic. But one thing that I do with it is Passamento style winemaking, which is something that I've done really since I've been in Nova Scotia, and I dabbled in it in Niagara a little bit beforehand. But it's basically, the drying of grapes and the reincorporation of those grapes into the fermentation at certain percentages. And I have the percentages that I like for Triumph, and I've done it the last few releases, and I think it really adds a lot. It really builds up the body and helps with the concentration, and you get a lot of juicy fruit character coming through. And but it's light and refreshing, and it's got that classic Nova Scotia style. So I'm gonna let Ray do a little bit of a rundown on the Triumph, which is very happy to have it back in the lineup after it was away in 2018. Ray, give it to you.
Hi guys, my name is Ray. Mike introduced me earlier. I'm going to be pouring for you guys our 2019 Triumph next. This is a single varietal red. It is loosely related to the Coolman family, and this is a big cult favorite with our regular customers. We did not have it last year, sadly, but after a long hiatus, we are super thrilled to have it back. It is pouring wonderfully right now. The nose on this guy, after being aged in Hungarian oak, you're going to get a lot of light cigar notes, a little bit of blueberry jam even, and with the flavor profile after all the Passamento style drying that Mike mentioned earlier, you're going to be getting cooked dark fruit, so cooked plum, black currant, maybe even a little dark chocolate on the finish.
The second wine that I chose to virtually taste with you guys today, you're probably all familiar with, and I chose it for specific reasons, is our 2019 Tidal Bay. So Tidal Bay appellation project here in the province, I'm sure most of you are familiar with it, and the reason I picked it is that a significant portion of the grapes that come from grape grower members all across the province, I know are used in a high degree with a lot of the Tidal Bays that are made. It's become kind of a workhorse wine for the province. It's something that we do significantly well, consistently well every year. That light, fresh, aromatic quality with it, it matches perfectly with our local cuisine. It's just a fun project. And the reason I wanted to include it with the tasting is, a few reasons, but the main one is the connection to you guys, the grape growers. In the province, there's a lot of Luckett and there's a lot of white varietals that are out there, and they really are the backbone of this wine that has really helped put Nova Scotia table wines on the map, not only across Canada but internationally as well. So kudos to you for helping contribute to this momentum of Tidal Bay.
So next we're going to be moving on to our 2019 Tidal Bay here. Now for you guys at home, I am actually from Ontario, not Nova Scotia, so I think that the concept of Tidal Bay is absolutely fantastic. I love that it makes the wine industry down here super collaborative and really community focused. Now with our Tidal Bay, the 2018 versus the 2019 vintage, the blend has changed a bit. We have removed Traminette out of the blend, and so going from 2019 to 2018, I have noticed that The flavoring on this guy, starting to get more towards fresh, golden, delicious apple, maybe a spritz of lemon on the finish. But at the end of the day, what we want our Title Bay to taste like is very crisp, very clean, very thirst quenching.
Well, we've talked about a red and we've talked about a white. So, I mean, I guess in a balanced world, we would probably throw a rosé in here, and this is what I want to do. But I'm going to do a little twist here for you. Rosés are really great out of this region. We do it really well. It's almost in the same realm of Tidal Bay, where like there's a consistent quality of the rosés that are being produced in Nova Scotia, and they range from bone dry to extra sweet, you know, depending on where you're getting it from and what your style and what your preferences are. So there's a lot of variability, and it's great, but it's consistently good. And I think you've seen an increase in rosé production across the province, and likely you will see a continuation of that. It's something that really works well with our growing season. You can really get a lot of good quality out of these grapes. You're getting long maturation times and, you know, phenological ripeness and you know with the long growing season, but still retaining acidity and those things that really work well with rosés in a refreshing capacity. So I make a few rosés here. We've got our Rosetta, which is like our still wine. We have a new fizz rosé, which is like a slightly spritzy, frizzante style kind of rosé that you know is a partner to our Foam Box Fizz, which has been a popular wine here for years. But we have a new one out. Well, it's not really new. It's been around for a couple of years, but it's sort of the new, I guess it's a new kid, sort of maybe a middle brother, a series of brothers. I wanted to talk about our Hair of the Dog can series. This is a little project that has been incredibly fun right from the get-go. Gina Luckett, our GM and owner, basically wanted to, her and I started sort of talking about canned wine back in like 2017. 2018 we kind of really started taking it seriously. We did like a tiny little singular, you know, one-off run with a fun little can, and when we decided to take it a little bit more seriously, because as a trend, canned wines and different packaging for wines is something that is not only being accepted around the world, but it's thriving. It's really driving a lot of markets. Certainly in hip wine markets all around the world, but this is something that is really exploding, and so we wanted to play around with it, and we put together the Hair of the Dog, which was a neat little idea. And what it is, it's a spritzy sort of rosé, very dry. But it's served in a can, and we basically made 3 cans with the same wine in each can, each featuring a different vineyard dog of one of the dogs that roams our vineyards, you know, night and day. They live here on the property, and so you can choose your favorite dog if you wanted to buy it that way. So there's Pippa, Gracie, and Lloyd, and unfortunately Gracie at the end of last year passed away. But we've kept her on the can because she was a great dog around the vineyard. She was always very helpful removing birds and other things. So you know, Godspeed, Gracie, you know, wherever you are. Anyways, it's a fun little thing. It's super exciting. People are really into it. This old misconception about cans and boxes, box wine, and all this stuff, it's really changing. Like the demographic of wine drinker is changing, and people are being less, you know, tied and adhered to the old rules of the past, where, like, you know, they connected quality sometimes to what was how the wine was served or produced. And there's a whole new young group of folks out there that are throwing caution to all that, and it's great. And so you're seeing like really quality products getting released in these different packaging. You're seeing it around the province. There's also some really great canned work obviously happening here in the province. There's several wineries that are excelling in it right now, and there's many more who are working on projects. I think there's at least 4 that I know of. And some of your grapes have likely gone into some of those products from Benjamin Bridge, from the Devonian Coast Company, from us, from Avondale Sky, and probably some more coming down the line. So I don't think anyone should expect this to be a one-off. I think you're going to start to see a lot more of this. And why not? It's fun, it's enjoyable, it makes a lot of sense. They're single-serve cans, 250 ml. Basically, it's a glass of wine per can. You can buy 3 of them, and it's like the same as a bottle. They're really fun. They're great. They look cool. The packaging's great, and more importantly for me, the wine inside is like super clean, super refreshing. Everyone's been loving it. It's a great summertime drink. So I'm going to give it over to Ray. She can talk about the dogs. And I want you to try it. Get in here and try it out. It's going quick. You're starting to sell it at the NSLC, but baby steps, and it moves quick as soon as we bring it in. So give it a try, and yeah, I hope you really enjoy it.
Okay guys, so the last wine that we're going to be talking about today is our canned Hair of the Dog wine. This is a very cool one for me to talk about, especially being in my 20s. A lot of people my age really like canned wines, and I think it's also very fantastic that we are producing a lot of canned wines, not just at Luckett Vineyards, but at other wineries in the valley, given the fact that there's a much more reduced carbon footprint when you're canning and shipping these items. Now, as far as the canned wine goes, with the Hair of the Dogs, they are all Lackady and Leon Malo co-ferment, kept at very cold temperatures. And the result here is going to be a very crisp, very zesty wine. Gonna have flavors of light strawberry, a little bit of grapefruit on the finish, and of course, who doesn't love a can with a dog on it? This is our owner, Pete Luckett's dog, and we find that people really enjoy those, so there you go.
Anyways, guys, thanks for your time. I appreciate you tuning in. I know it's a Friday afternoon, and it's I'm gonna assume it's beautiful weather. I'm filming this in advance, but there's a lot of things you could be doing. So thank you. I appreciate your time and your energy, and I hope you enjoyed the tasting. You learned a little bit about what we're doing here. Checking out my sweet videographer skills, because apparently I'm doing that too now. So I had fun doing it. So anyways, listen guys, enjoy the rest of the day. I'm sure we'll bump into you soon. Enjoy the rest of the summer. Looking forward to harvest. She's going to be a good one this year. Fingers crossed. Everybody positive. I think we got this. We're back. All the best, guys. Cheers.
Thanks very much, Mike.
Hey,
good messages there. Good. Nice to see you guys with a graduate working in your tasting room there from the Cool Climb course. We got to start working in our vineyard. So
got to start the next generation of these folks. Getting these guys. I'm getting too long in the tooth for this. I need a few people around. Listen, I wanted to say, I just realized this morning that 10 years ago, the day before the Grape Grower Tour 10 years ago was my first day arriving in Nova Scotia to work with Gina Haverstock at Gaspro. I completely forgot about it. And the first thing I did on like 12 hours after I got here was go and visit all these vineyards. And I had no idea what was happening. I had no idea which way was north, south, east, and west. And yeah, it's funny, a decade kind of just slipped by us. So it's an anniversary for me today as well. So there you go. Thanks, guys.
That's perfect. That brings us to raise a glass to that one too. So that's really cool. It's kind of neat too, because Karen and I really started our journey into this whole viticulture craziness about 10 years as well. We started looking at buying the property here from my father, and going out and meeting some of the winery owners to get a sense of the industry. So the decade, where does it go? Now we're over here with a whole bunch of vines we're trying to take care of. So it's all good. So Mike's with us today, everyone. So if you got a question for Mike, hit the Q&A tab and get it in here. It's fantastic. I mean, you guys got such a great portfolio. I think it's nice how you are busting out the limits a little bit. And like you point out, Mike, it's so great to stop being held in that traditional thing, a 750 bottle with a cork in it, right? I mean, first the cork goes, you get the screw cap, and then we start looking at these other options, and they're great options. I mean, you don't have to always pull a cork out. Some traditionalists love that feel of the pop of the cork, but there's a lot of options out there, and the convenience nowadays of how much, put a can in your purse and go to your friend's house, right?
Definitely.
It's fantastic.
I mean, we've noticed it all across the board, and we've been really lucky here in Nova Scotia, because I got to admit, like in the last 10 years, and you mentioned it earlier, like I would consider it sort of like a second phase, I guess, in our modern history, right? grape growing and winemaking the last decade. And, you know, we're arguably entering into a third period right now with new growth and new people and new producers and a whole new generation of people. But in that 10-year period, you know, like our industry has been at the forefront of like a lot of the you know, comparable trends around the world, you know, like low alcohol wines, aromatic whites, spritzy Moscato, Frizzanti style wines, you know, and then obviously traditional method sparkling, which we do so well at here as a region. You know, these are the fruit forward reds. Like these are the trends that are happening around the world right now. And we're kind of in this really great predicament here where what we grow and how we grow it and the styles of wines that naturally are made here well are right in that wheelhouse. So, you know, and we've been at the forefront of that. So we're kind of this quiet little kid, you know, on the coast of the country. And, you know, sometimes it feels like we're a little isolated out here, but I can guarantee you that over the last 5 years, the national talk hasn't been as much in BC and it hasn't been as much in Ontario. It's been a lot of focus on what's happening here. And a lot of the work that you guys as growers, you know, you should be proud of that. Like you're an integral part of that growth and that development and that reputation that we've kind of garnered across the country right now. You know, people love the fringe and they like the interesting, and what we're doing out here is right on top of that. So it's been great. It's been a really good time for the industry. So onward and upward, I guess we go. Right?
So speaking of interesting in the fringe, we've got one question, and I was wondering what you think the possibility of a Pinot White here in Nova Scotia is.
I don't know. I mean, like I've heard that kind of come up a few times before. I mean, I think right now people are really just trying to like harness, you know, Pinot itself, Pinot Noir in the classic form and figure out a way to make that work. And I think you're seeing that. There's a lot of people who've been taking risks over the last 10 years and trying different growing techniques and yields and you know, trellis and, you know, spacing and concentration and everything. And you're seeing it, and you're seeing successes, not only just with traditional method sparkling, but with still wines in incredible years. And like, let's face it, this might be one of those years. Like 2020 is looking to be a 17 or a 12, you know, where, you know, the heat units are there to make these wines and make them certainly on par with anywhere else in the region. For me, like, you know, I'd prefer to play around with more like, you know, Blanc de Noirs and that sort of thing, like using Pinot for that way. But I mean, like, you know, who knows, right? Because 10 years ago, people weren't thinking that we could grow a lot of the things that we're doing now. And a lot of the people that have taken the risks have proven that it is possible. So I kind of rambled there, but hopefully that was
No, that's great. And you mentioned, you know, a little earlier with the Triumph, you embraced that drying of the grapes and adding that back in, right, to get that more complex flavor. Do you see that as a strategy with some of those classic vinifera varieties, you know, Pinot, Chard?
I don't know. I mean, I learned Appassimento winemaking in Niagara with a winemaker who at some of the places that he worked at really like pushed the envelope with the Appassimento style and tried with almost every varietal from Riesling, Sauvignon Blanc, you know, everything. There have been a few little experiments from some of the wineries with some of the whites. I know Simon did some you know, similar type work with Vin de Paille with Chardonnay years ago. It was a fabulous, you know, incredible, interesting wine that he made. I don't know. I mean, I think because the yields generally from most vinifera that are being grown, like, you know, they're quite concentrated and tight to begin with. You know, you really, I wouldn't be exploring it myself right off the gate, because what I did find right when I moved here was that I thought that the structure of the hybrid grapes, you know, especially the Kuhlmann varietals, Lucy Kuhlmann, Triumph, my two favorites, I think, actually, as far as drying goes, it worked really well. I thought it really benefited those grapes to maybe more so than other varietals. Does it mean that we wouldn't try it? Well, I mean, you can try anything if you're really willing to go for it. But, you know, I think for us right now, I've been doing the same, you know, I've been playing around with the ratios for 10 years, and I have kind of, you know, numbers that I like that are consistent, and for certainly for Triumph and for Lucy Coolman, which are two varietals that I use a lot of, you know, grapes for drying. You know, you sacrifice the quantity and you know, for the quality level at that stage, you know, so it does take a lot more grapes to produce a smaller volume, but it works, and it seems like, you know, a good thing to do. I don't know, maybe one day we'll play around with Pinot, but, you know, or Chardonnay or something, but we'll see. Baby steps.
For sure. So we put Jean-Guy on the spot for one pretty awkward question. So we have to do
Doesn't
that
his vineyard
to you
look
as well.
fantastic? Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off.
Oh,
Like, that drone footage was great.
is.
Like, Jean-Guy, you know,
Yeah.
someone like, great work, guys. You're doing really great stuff down there. So
Yeah, and I've been wanting to get down there for sure. We've got to take the
beautiful
drive
spot.
sometime. So we have a question here from a grower,
Yes.
and they're wondering how you see the pricing strategy developing over the next few years.
The pricing strategy for raw grapes, you mean? I mean, so
I'm assuming, Mike, but it didn't really specify. So
I mean, like, if we're being very honest, the price of grapes out here is quite high comparatively to almost any other region. You know, and you know, that said, there are realities, I guess, of viticulture out here that maybe warrant that. Usually what ends up happening is that the price does not go up. It generally tends to go down as you know, more and more raw materials prove to be available. But I mean, we've been pretty consistent at prices for grapes for my 10 years here. You know, there's nothing really set, like, or legislated or anything like that as far as a price structure goes, but like, there's a pretty respectable honor system, I think, that works between all the wineries and all the growers, and I think it's pretty consistent across the board now. It may have not have been a decade ago, but, you know, like, the price points are pretty constant, and they are pretty fair in the giant scheme of, like, you know, the cost of grapes on average nationally or even internationally for that matter. So I can't imagine there's going to be a lot of, you know, abrupt change to the structures that are currently in place. But, you know, you never know. Like, sometimes Mother Nature will dictate that as well. You know, if we can continue having struggles or issues, or the opposite end of that, banner years, you know, where grapes are bountiful, you know, that sometimes that dictates the price as well. So.
yep, perfect. I think the best thing we can do as growers to make sure that price stays up there is keep growing better and better grapes, so you guys make better and better wine, and keep selling it out, so you need more and more grapes.
Well, it works for us, right? So.
So with that, I think we're going to move on. Thanks very much, Mike, and
No
thanks
problem.
very much,
Thanks,
Ray,
guys.
for joining us on that.
I appreciate it. Have a great day, everybody.
So we're going to move on to another PowerPoint here from a platinum sponsor, Phytocultures. So now we're going to invite Kevin and Becca back to the screens. Kevin's going to give us some highlights from his dealings with China.
Yeah, so for now for something different. To cap off our virtual tour, Kevin's going to take us east and show us some of the work he's been doing over there. So, go.
All right. I'll get to Becca. Just let me pull this up and then I can do this.
Sorry, I can keep going.
Yeah, I'll get there.
No, I can't. I'm not an improver. Well, those were some great tours. Thanks everybody who was involved in Jean-Guy and Stefan and Mike and all of the advertisers. There's some cool work going on behind the scenes.
All right, we're getting there. Come on. To play. Blocking my screen.
That wall.
Yeah, it's quite a thing to climb. It's starting to actually disintegrate. Interestingly. All right, let's go to
on the bottom right, Kevin. You can see.
Yes. Yeah, I'm just getting to play from start. How's that?
Yep.
Can people see it?
Yep.
Okay. China is growing. I first went there actually in 2003, but I've been going the last 10 years. I went from 2009 till 2019 was my last summer, and thankfully I didn't have to go back this year. But I thought I'd give you a little tour of kind of the things I saw and learned about China. With this many people, they have a huge market, and it's something to consider. If we look at the land masses and you think about Nova Scotia being part of the North America, the New World regions are far greater in size. And I put most of the US in there, as well as Canadian provinces, because if I hunt everywhere in the world, all 50 United States, Alaska included, and Hawaii, as well as all across Canada, I can find somebody growing grapes trying to make wine. Now, commercially, Nova Scotia is doing a great job, and I've always been impressed and have loved every time I've been down there. But to look at it in terms of world wine production, Italy, France, Spain, and the USA are at the top, and everyone would think so. But China's considered number 10 and growing. They are expanding fairly rapidly while Europe declines. They're trying to make their inroads into the world wine market, but it's kind of a funny thing. However, when you look at countries that are importing wine, and I suggest to Nova Scotia is, the wineries there, don't be afraid of it. China is a huge importer of wines from around the world. In the last number of years, their increase of importation into the country has been, almost 80% increase over the last 5 years. Germany's declined, the US has slightly gone up, but it's something to take into account. And when you consider a country with over 1 billion people, and of that, you don't need a lot of people with money to be able to go out and buy wine to suddenly say, hey, there's a market for us. The majority of the wines are sold roughly in the $5 to $7 Canadian range. However, the bulk of these wines, China's notorious in that they call themselves Chinese wine. They bring in tankers, literally tankers of wine from around the world. And if it's bottled in China, they call it Chinese rather than marketed as foreign source. But other ones that they've tried to make on their own, but they've still blend, are extremely high priced. And I want to put this in perspective. I went into one winery, Chateau Junding, and I'll show you a picture of them later. They listed the little price at the bottom is an example, 1,979 RMB. That's their unit, or the yuan renminbi. You divide that by 6, they're trying to charge $330 Canadian for a bottle of wine. What was particularly humorous was that they had a tasting bar. And I'd asked Mike before of how many tastings you would get out of a bottle. And we said, maybe 15 if you got that, 15, 16. I could buy by tastings for half the price of buying the bottle if it was packed. They haven't figured out marketing completely yet. It was something that I found amazing, that instead of spending $330, I could spend $150 and still get the whole bottle, piece by piece, which doesn't really make sense to me, but no one explains it. So China, I put in perspective. Lost my screen. Come here, come back. Uh-oh. Can you still see my screen? Oh,
Yes, we can.
oh, here we go. China is, you know, a big country when you think about it relative to the width of it. A peculiarity of China is that all of China is in one time zone. When I landed in Shanghai on the East Coast and I flew to basically their West Coast, which was a 5.5-hour flight, I was still in the same time zone. Now you want to see something really bizarre is you suddenly realize everything operates on Shanghai or Beijing time. So Beijing is here, Shanghai is down here, there's South Korea and North Korea are over in here. Basically, the place that I was going to was a small area up in what they call Shandong province. There's 6 areas. The westernmost area I was in Xinjiang. If you watch the news and you see about the story about the Uyghurs in Western China and the unrest out there, but they produce massive amounts of table grapes and phenomenal amounts of raisins, literally mountains of raisins when I was there. But this is the area I went to, this little particular one right out on this point. And this is a place called Mainguy. If you look across, there happens to be right across the water is North Korea. So I joked if I was high enough up, I could actually see across and see Kim Jong-un in Pyongyang, North Korea, which thankfully I was in China a few years back and I felt safe there because he's not going to bother attacking China. The Mainguy area, this particular one is unusual in that it gets precipitation, but it's very dry. 150 millimeters of rain in season, that's it. But they do have 200 plus frost-free days. The coldest it gets is about -6 to -8, and their warmest temperatures were 32 to 34. They wanted to grow the noble grapes because the thing I've learned going to China, it's all about the package, not so much about the content. What they want to do, they said if they're growing Cabernet Sauvignon or Cabernet Franc, Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, Riesling, if France, Germany, Europe, that's what they're going to grow. Doesn't mean it fits with their palate, but when they want to do something, they do it. So this was the vineyard before it began. This was 2009, actually 2010, when I got there and they said, can we put a vineyard in here? And I looked around and I thought, okay, well, we'll try. This is the kind of soil that they were dealing with, very gritty, granular, dry. Off in the distance, you can't quite see it. I was remarked by Jean-Guy when he was saying about the protection of the vineyard was the cemetery. That happens to be headstones in the far distance of this picture. In China, they don't have cemeteries, but they just go out and bury their people wherever and put a headstone and don't tell anybody. It's very unusual. That's their soil. Imagine putting grapes into this and saying they're going to grow. I had my reservations and I'm looking at it and I'm going, I dug a hole and I'm looking at the side and it's pretty gritty and I'm going, there's no organic matter, about 0.5% granite base, surrounded by water. So they had it, but they were growing agricultural crops on it. So somebody with money wants to decide they're going to do something and they just go ahead and do it. So they start working on it. All of the site was terraced. There was 45 acres of plantable land on it. There was 152 separate blocks, each on their own individual little terrace. So needless to say, whenever I went to walk there, it was like climbing up and down the Annapolis Valley every day, and terracing all over the place. They have big equipment, they come in, they want to do it, they will move it. For their vines, when they propagate, all of their vines were propagated in a greenhouse. Unlike a lot of places where they're done outdoors, they would take them, they would bring them in, they would graft and wax, they grow the vine, and all vines that were planted over there were all done as green plants. There was no dormant cuttings. So nothing was done as a dormant grafted vine. They were all put in there, recognizing this is a hand labor country. Everything's done by hand. You load them on the truck by hand. You do them in the greenhouse by hand. This is their mechanism for putting out planting. Little bamboo posts, and every spot they're going to plant a grapevine. So the vines show up again on this little trailer, and whoever's around, that's who helps. They get labor of all types. I mean, that was unusual to see a tractor of that size. That was a rare occurrence. Nothing is done for mechanization over there. Here's your planting system. I joked to my friend Matthias Oppenlander and the others who run the machine planters in Ontario. I said, oh, these guys have got you beat. And they looked at me and said, what do you mean? I said, well, all they do is get, 50, 60, 80 guys out there. If you notice though how hard the soil is, he's using a pickaxe to crunch the hole, and the shovel will go in. They throw in a little vermicompost because there's no organic matter with the plant. And then they'll go back. People are out ahead. We were going to be short the very first time I was there. The crew was short. They suddenly was 60 more people the next day for planting. I don't know where they came from, what they knew how to do, but they were there. You dig a hole, that's the blade of the shovel. They had a planting wire, the post, and then they would put the vine in. As fast as a person sticks the vine in, there's somebody there with a shovel to backfill it. And there's your grafted vine just stuck in place. Now you got to say, well, you put a plant like this that's been in a greenhouse and you haven't got any water, how are you going to deal with it? Well, they have the rows and they furrow around each side of the vines. This is my classic thumbs up. At least they got the right side up when they put it in the ground. And they flood it. They just flood water down and bring it in. They take it out of the lakes that are nearby, wherever they can. They'll bring it in by truck, and that's how they water it. There's no trickle irrigation. There's no overhead irrigation in place. Now, Jean-Guy, you talked about posting your own vineyard. I want to show you these posts. This is their end post as well as their in-row posts. Not steel, not wood, but 4-inch by 6-inch cut granite. Imagine hauling those out into the vineyard to put in place for your row posts. How do you get them in? You send out a couple of guys with an auger and hopefully you can get deep enough. Why do they use cut granite? Because the steel post will hit the granite and break. Wood posts will blow over too easily. They don't stay. The granite is solid enough that it has a vertical drop that it will hold itself in place. And then this is how you see people, it takes 2 people to carry 1 post out into the vineyard. And they will go out and drop them in. What amazed me out of everything out of all of this, everything was straight. I don't know how they could figure it out. I could never have that good an eye to keep everything in line, but they did it. And there's the example at the end. The end post has a slight pull, bend back. They couldn't put anchors in the ground because nothing to hold, so they would just bend that post and put it on a slight angle to try and hold it. This is to give you an idea. So these are about 7 foot. This is my friend Peter Buis, a big grower in Ontario. Peter's 6'4". So that post is out of the ground about 6 feet. It's in the ground about 2.5 feet. So each post weighs about 250 pounds. Now the dilemma, and I put this picture in because I wanted to show you, this is what happens in China when they suddenly make decisions at the government level but really don't tell you. I showed up the one year in the spring and all of a sudden part of the vineyard was missing. Why? Because they decided to suddenly build a giant highway that was going to cut off part of the vineyard across the valley for the new airport they had just built. And that's what you're left with. You've got posts right at the edge. They've cut it down, but I just wanted to show you a vertical as if you're going to dig a hole to go see. There's not a lot there. And it's pretty gritty stuff. Yet, over time, they grow and they flourish. The vines become dark and green. Their tonnages are still low though. They're still only running about 1.5 tons to 2 tons per acre. 2 tons would be a heavy crop load for them. Here's their high-tech tractors. I got to drive one of them. This is everywhere. And just so you're aware, for you in Nova Scotia, could you imagine these going down Highway 101? Well, they do. In China, these are on the same highway as the tractor trailers, the cement trucks, the cars, and you've got farmers driving these things on the same roads. And for high-tech spraying, here's your high-tech pest control. For those of you who have to spend a lot of money on a sprayer in China, forget about it. You get a barrel, you get a little hypro pump, and you get a giant long garden hose, and you send the guy out with a wand. If you notice, he has high-tech safety equipment on, which is what we would call now a COVID mask, and he still wears it down underneath his chin. They're using all the pesticides that we use in North America. Again, I just shuddered. When I took the picture, I'm trying to stay far enough away. But if you were a little more high-tech, here's their specialty one. Imagine this, battery-powered backpack sprayers. So you're gonna go out and spray your vineyard, but you're doing it by backpack because you can't get the garden hose and the tank out there close enough. So one spring in 2018, I went and said, geez, they must have mechanization of some sort. So I just tossed these last few in and I saw it looked like a hydraulic sprayer. Well, lo and behold, it was. And this is it. It's a 3-wheeled unit coming in. If you notice, it's got a hydraulic spray coming out the back. There's the fan to give it some assist. But I thought, again, here's the high-tech safety equipment, canvas tarp. The guy is wearing a COVID mask and he's wearing no socks. So you can tell safety is really of paramount importance in China. Hand harvest, like everywhere. They put them into the boxes, but to get them out, there's just a little wagon and a guy taking them out to take them to the end, to put them on a little tractor to haul it to the winery. But all in all, when you get some nights and everything and things early in the season, this was a picture taken in June one year, things can look pretty nice. You get them cleaned up, they start to look good. And then you find out, so the Shadow Ending bottle that I showed you, this is their winery. Now to put it in perspective, this was also a winery that was 50% owned by COFCO, which is a cereal, oilseeds, foodstuffs company of China, and is half owned by the Chinese government. So needless to say, you can tell who was bankrolling this. Or they have a tendency, they really like to make it sound like someplace else. So instead of the Napa Valley, there were wineries going up in Napa Village. And they built this beautiful winery full of Italian equipment, absolute to the nth degree. And in my entire time there, I never saw a grape ever delivered to the place, but I know they bottled wine, so I know it was being brought in by tankers. But they had state-of-the-art equipment inside. Or if you're somebody down there, you move in and you've made your money in the investment world, and you go down and you decide, hey, I want to build a Scottish castle that looks, or a winery that looks like a Scottish castle. Well, this is what you get. Right down to the turrets, lookouts, sight barriers, right inside. If you notice, this is their tasting area, marble floor, the roof, even to the point of having Scottish sayings and Scottish patrons on the wall. It was hilarious. I couldn't believe it. It was something, yet you were easily miles from anywhere else. Yet at the very end of it, I found one solitary guy flying a Canadian kite, which sort of made me feel at home, at least periodically, when I was in Shanghai and elsewhere. But the Chinese wine industry is there. Are they going to be good winemakers? It's going to take a long, long time. They're more, I will call it, and Mike would appreciate, I call them chemists, not winemakers. They're concerned more about the color and what the label looks like than what's actually in the bottle. So I don't have a lot of fear. Whereas the Nova Scotia people have done the right way of taking the grapes, blending them, looking at them properly, growing them well, making fantastic wines, which is why I go back to Nova Scotia every year and going back next year as well, coming down to see you. So with that, I will finish with the flag because I am a proud Canadian and I think we all should be.
Thanks, Kevin. That was enlightening. It's a whole different world. So I appreciate you sharing your photos and your experiences, and I hope you continue to do so. I can't imagine using granite posts, 250 pounds for two people. That's impressive, gotta say. So do we have any questions, folks? You can head on down to the Q&A button if you have any questions for Kevin or for really anyone else that's still online, which it looks like everybody. So we'll be wrapping it up after this. So any final questions? You can go ahead and write them in. How's the weather been up there, Kevin?
We were in a heat wave. We've cooled off a little bit. We've been very dry this summer, but we're running up. Veraison's begun. We're in good shape. The winemakers are feeling fairly enthusiastic, and the grape growers were quite relieved that they went through their price negotiations, listening to the question relative to Mike earlier. And in less than 3 days, they came to an agreement, and it looks like you're going to buy pretty much all that's being grown this year, which is a happier thing than other years. But overall, things are looking in pretty good shape. Quality is good, and they're very pleased.
Good. So pretty consistent with here as well. It seems like over the last week, we've kind of gotten out of that heat wave, and it's cooler at night, and things are turning toward fall. So it's hard to believe it's the end of August already.
Yes, amazing.
Okay, we have a question. Says, fascinating presentation, Kevin. Having been to China, it is definitely a different approach taken. Do you foresee plans that they would export wine, or is it all intended for an internal domestic market?
it's primarily going to be a domestic market. They can't satisfy the local demand. Wine is considered a luxury item to particular people, so they buy it as a gift. And that's why I don't really foresee, and to be honest, the stuff I've tasted is how do I describe it? I know home winemakers that bake better stuff. Yet over there, like I said, but they don't know what tastes good. They just assume that it's good wine. They couldn't tell. I opened bottles that were completely faulted, and they had no idea that they were faulted. They just thought this was the flavor.
Yeah.
It was shocking.
It was the right color.
Yeah.
So we have another question. What do the Chinese do for fertilizing?
They have synthetic fertilizers. A lot of them, they try and get compost where they can, cattle manure. They've actually composted chicken manure where they can get it. There's a massive chicken industry in there, but not in the local areas where the wine grapes are grown. But they do use the synthetics. They can get, whenever they send me this stuff, they have like 10, 20, 20 and materials like that they will use. They apply it in a rather bizarre fashion. When I visited the one place, years ago, the old style of fertilization was they would dig a trench down the middle of the rows in between vines, and they would come in with manure and just fill them solid with manure and then cover it over the soil and let it rot. And then basically it would leach sideways. They were still doing that with synthetic fertilizers, and it just absolutely made no sense to me. And they were doing it late fall. So in terms of plant uptake, it was totally opposite to anything that I had run into. So the people I was working with couldn't really fathom putting it out underneath the vines. They had a great challenge in understanding that. The second part was they assumed if they put a dry fertilizer down, that it was going to evaporate. Oh. And I just going, okay, it's not going to form a gas. It's not going to run away on you. They had they were kept thinking of it very much like the old, manures that basically you would, if you had it, you would lose and you get some gaseous form ammonia coming off. They would leach very quickly. So, oh no, they have all the stuff they have everything we have. It's just a lot of times they've got to apply it by hand.
Right, different methods.
Yep.
Okay, another question here. Besides ice wine, what Canadian wines do they know?
They know Chardonnay, they know Riesling, the off dries. Generally, what's done a better job of getting into their marketplace have been the slightly sweet wines. That's why ice wine was a high demand item, because it also matched their palate. Their real challenge over there for the majority of the people, the food that they eat, red wines don't match, yet they're buying it like crazy. It just doesn't, when you really look at it, it's not blending it with the local cuisine, but it's because that's what the label says, and they buy labels. They buy things that look good.
Interesting. Well, we don't have any questions right now, so thanks very much, Kevin. If you had anything else that you'd like to impart on us, you've shared so much.
Not so much, except my wife and I are hoping to spend a month in Nova Scotia next summer. So hopefully we'll get a chance to visit a number of the vineyards and talk with people when we're there.
Looking forward to it.
Thanks very much, Becca. Thanks very much, Kevin. That's a great presentation. What an interesting outlook on something that's, I mean, they're growing grapes like we are, but it's a completely different way of doing it for sure. A little jealous of all the labor they can muster up, but I don't think I'm jealous of their spraying methods. So I think we'll keep doing it how we're doing it here. Well, thank you everyone for being a part of the summer tour, both to the presenters and also to everyone that joined in to watch. Thanks to Kevin for his informative and insightful presentation, and also for the China connection, which was extremely interesting. I've wanted to make the drive south to see GGANS vineyard for a while now, and the tour today makes me want to do it more. I can see us sharing a bottle on that hill, Jean-Guy. I missed our table full of wine to try this year, but thanks so much to Mike for the update from Luckett's and Ray for leading us through a tasting. Cheers. A big thank you again to the Summer Tour Committee of Becca, Joanne, Vanessa, Marcel, and Dan. Did a great job. Thanks again to Perenia and Francisco for all the help and the technical stuff. Learning how to adapt to the challenges that COVID brings us has been hard on us all. I'm glad we could still find a way to get together, and I hope everyone is safe and healthy. Have a great evening, rest of the afternoon, and enjoy whatever bottle you have opened. Here's to all of you and the upcoming 2020 vintage. Cheers.